Sounds good.
Good day. Welcome to the Africans in America podcast. With me is Weruche.
Hi, everyone.
Weruche, a lot has been happening, and we decided that today we are going to look at how Africa fits into the geopolitical space, especially in this multipolar world where we have Russia, China, and Africa and America wanting a piece
Mhm.
of Africa, and they are all making their strategic moves within Africa. And we know how these moves are very critical. When there's conflict in Africa, it affects us, and when there's development,
Indeed.
a lot of people stay back and benefit from the growth of Africa. So,
Correct.
so, being that I've been running a blog on a channel on geopolitics, where Riche suggested that today she's gonna grill me with some questions regarding geopolitics and Africa. Um,
Correct.
Please, I beg, don't fire me with the one I cannot answer.
No,
But
you'll be able to answer everything. It's
you
okay.
can shoot. Let's see what we can do.
What we can come up with. Okay. So
Mm,
this has to do with the green energy paradox. Okay.
mm,
China funds Namibia's $9.4 billion green hydrogen project, right?
mm.
But also it builds 19 coal plants in Africa based on information out there. How does Beijing reconcile its ecological civilization rhetoric with fossil fuel exports?
Well, what I know is that a few years ago, maybe almost between 5 to 10 years ago, China actually did say that they were not going to be funding any coal mines out there. So if they have coal mines that supporting and building in Africa, I'm not too aware of that. But green
Mhm.
hydrogen project, that I do know that, but they are not so strong in it. What they really are strong
Mhm.
at is solar. They are strong
Mhm.
in other renewables because their capacity to produce solar power is something they now export. In fact, they are so good at it that just as is happening in America, they stop them from bringing in their solar panels into America because they've cracked the code. It's very cheap and they produce it so much. And now news is out there that China produces as much energy from solar power as America produces, almost as America produces from all power that they generate. You should know that China produces 3 times the amount of power that electricity that America generates. And that's
Mhm.
mainly from solar these days and
Mhm.
wind. So whatever they are doing in Namibia, I am not so sure about the other coal mines that they or coal plants that they are
Mhm.
supposedly involved with. Because
Mhm.
what I do know is that the Xi Jinping long ago, almost 10 years ago, said China
Mhm.
will be out of the game of sponsoring and funding the construction of coal power
Gold
plants.
mines. Okay. Okay, that's good. Now, Huawei controls 70% of Africa's 4G networks, right? Is China's tech dominance creating infrastructure lock-in or closing the digital divide faster than Western alternatives?
Well, there's a simple answer to that question. There's no Western alternative. There's just none.
Mm,
Huawei and ZTE, the Chinese companies are the by miles. I think they contribute well over 70% of the base stations. They call it GSM net base stations for all of Africa and probably for all over the world too. Because the way it
mm,
is that they got to be so good at that technology. The same thing too that they did in solar, they also did in with base stations, and they became very good at it. So if you go to the Middle East, they are the ones who produce for every country in the Middle East. They produce for almost everybody in the world. Huawei is by miles the world's leader in base stations. With them and ZTE, there are some European countries called Ericsson and Alcatel. In fact, I know a
hmm.
Nigerian company that used to run with Alcatel, and that company is
Yes.
it's Globacom. But I
Hmm.
don't know their recent procurements and how updated they are. But Alcatel Lucent is not one of the players anymore by any means. But you see, Huawei is also when you buy a base station from them, it's they have long-term relationships with you,
Mhm,
possibly that can lead to upgrade because they lead also in 5G. And then they
mhm,
also have other things they give you. Like when you go to Africa now, we have what we call transfer of money. That platform, USSD platform that use in transferring money that does digital inclusion, 777,
mhm,
737, every single bank has their own way by which you transfer money by SMS. In America, yeah, it's called Zelle. And
mhm,
that platform is also given by Huawei. Huawei is so involved in so many things that there's just no competition. There's a lock-in, and
mhm,
it is them who also give 5G base stations, and they have the technology. Nobody has
mhm,
anything regarding 5G near to them. And that's
mhm,
why China is the world's leading 5G country. They have well over almost 2 million 5G base stations, and there's nobody coming close, not even America. America doesn't
mhm,
even have 5G that much. They are trying to stop them from selling in America, and they are now have to rely with Nokia and Ericsson base stations. But
mhm,
they are costly and they are not as efficient and they're not technologically advanced as the Huawei
mhm.
one. So Africa has no choice. The cheaper option and the most technologically advanced option is that of Huawei.
That's Huawei. That's cool. Now we're going to focus on economic and debt dynamics, right?
Mhm.
Angola repays oil-backed loans to China while facing fuel shortages. Hmm? How do
Mm.
collateralized deals impact African fiscal sovereignty? And could the AU's new debt framework change this?
Africa is a very sad situation when it comes to refining of oil. You know,
Hmm.
what had happened over Africa in Africa over the past almost 30, 40 years is that they had been captured by a cabal of oil produce sellers. We
Hmm.
have them, they call them Glencoe, they call them so many, they're mainly in London and they're mainly in Britain, or
Hmm.
they are on the London Stock Exchange. For the past 30 years, they have formed a cabal that undermined every single refinery any African country tried to build. The downstream operations of oil refining in Africa is the weakest. So that even Angola, being the second largest producer of oil in sub-Saharan Africa, could not get a refinery going. Nigeria has almost four refineries in the hands of government. They were just not functioning because it was just a better option to import. They will undermine, they have systems by which they undermine the flow of the continuous operations of those refineries. And they did it so well so that they continue to sell oil. It is until recently that a Nigerian called Dangote now went ahead and built a refinery, 50,000 barrels per day. Now that is
Hmm.
expanding it to 700,000 barrels per day. That he has
Hmm.
changed the whole reality about oil in Africa.
In
Before
Africa,
then,
yeah.
no factory. There's only one South African factory that a refinery that have been working
Refinery.
or two, but they are even them too. They are struggling. So until
Hmm.
Dangote came, and we know that Dangote's journey was almost a 10. It almost broke him. He had to raise $19 billion. He had to collateralize and put forward
Hmm.
40 is almost, he has about 30 or 20, 25 to 30 cement plants all across Africa. He has sugar refineries. He has all this infrastructure, these enterprises that he had to put down to be able to raise money to build that refinery. It took him very long. But he has built it now. And that refinery is the reason why Nigeria is now having constant supply of oil. But even him complains that the cabal that wants to import oil is still very strong and very persistent in Africa. That's the thing. So that is the albatross for for Angola, because even though China buys the oil from them, China does not refine. China buys it and takes
Hmm.
it to China and refines it there. The whole refining process is a different thing altogether.
Interesting. Now, China holds over 30% of Kenya's external debt, with Zambia restructuring 6.3 billion in Chinese loans. Is the debt trap narrative overstated? Or are we seeing African states leverage BRI for strategic autonomy?
That is more what I will believe, that Africa is jumping at, they have seen an opportunity and they are grabbing it. Let's not forget that the West, led by London and New York, is private driven, and private driven banking systems and financial systems always look to
Mm.
profit. They always tell you that China there is entrapping a lot of African countries with loans and
Indeed,
debt.
that's the fear.
But
Mhm.
that's not true because one, China comes to give you a loan at by at a rate that is
The
beyond
lowest in
you would ever
mhm,
think, which is 2.5 to
lowest rate.
5%. But
Mhm.
for a country like Zambia, they have already been priced out by a company called, or institutions called credit rating agencies that undermine them so much. Those credit rating agencies will make Zambia pay interest rate on loans of 14 to 15%. And when Zambia is very desperate or Kenya is very desperate, Kenya will end up going to get bonds. They call them Euro bonds. And they'll be paying 14 and 18%. Now, junk Euro bonds in America are bonds that you get 4%, 3% and on. You don't get 5% even. If you get a 5% yield on a bond, it is very high. But for countries like Zambia and Kenya and Nigeria, Nigeria gets about 10%. They put it so high because the credit rating agencies have already said that we are not qualified for it already. So on the basis of that, they put us at a disadvantage. And anytime you buy these euro bonds from them and loans from them, you pay a lot. You mortgage the future of your country. So when China
Mhm.
comes, China says that okay, give us some of your oil, give us access to one of your mines, and we will price the loan at 2.5% to 3.5%. So what has those private individuals, one of the things that China does is that China gives the whole world alternatives. It is a bypass. When China gives you an alternative, you have an alternative access to financing. Before, you will not. You either go to London or you go to New York or you go to any other person in Frankfurt or Paris. They are a cabal, and you go to private people. A company, a financier like the Rothschilds are already financiers of governments in all the capitals of the world. We know them. BlackRock, the same thing too. So when you have this kind of tying in the West and the Chinese bring you an alternative, that is one of the things they didn't like China for. China was creating a pathway for countries like Kenya, for countries like Nigeria, for countries like Angola to get cheaper price loans, and we weren't looking their way again, and we were looking for alternative, and we were happy with it. That's why they started running down China in the media. Don't forget, they own Financial Times, they own Bloomberg, they own CNBC, they own, and then they make their congressmen to come and hold sessions in Congress and make all these claims. They own BBC. So this is really what is happening. China is a better deal for many African countries, and that's why they go for it.
Interesting. So as Wagner secures Mali's mines
Mm.
and China builds railways, is this opportunistic synergy or does China risk blowback from Russia's destabilizing role?
Russia was called in by some countries that were tired of the machinations of the French. You see, the French came since 1960. The French have been in Africa, especially they have the western and then the eastern part of their empire, which is the eastern stretch of it gets to Congo Brazzaville and Central
Mhm.
African Republic.
Yeah.
Then these countries started to suffer some political crisis, and they always felt that the French were part of that crisis. The French played not too nice politics because many of those countries signed security pacts with them. And so for those countries that have resources like diamond, or for Niger Republic that has
Mhm.
uranium, Niger Republic is very rich in uranium, and the French are one of the only countries in Europe that went all in with nuclear power plants. So they needed the uranium from Niger, but they didn't price them well. And when the first prime minister of Niger tried to say, please, can we get better pricing for our uranium? They promptly organized a coup against him. And that's the narrative. So when
Wild.
recently the crisis that came out of Obama's bombing of Libya under the framework of NATO created so much security problems because Libya now had a lot of people now had arms because Libya had large caches of arms, and then there was this situation where these arms now got into the hands of people who call themselves Islamic Jihad in the North Africa. When that arm got into their hand, and then the countries like Mali and countries like Burkina Faso started looking up to the French to support them, to help them to fight these people, the French didn't do as much as was expected of them to do. And it was for that reason that they went and called Wagner Group to come. And then the Wagner Group, being a mercenary organization, did what they did best. But now, outside the framework of the Wagner Group, those countries have gone ahead and signed security agreements with the Russian state. The Wagner Group has been dissolved, or they are not as effective in. They just recently were recalled out of Africa to be part of the ongoing war in Russia, between Russia and Ukraine. But they were the ones who gave cogent and concrete security to those countries. As regards to the Chinese, like I told you, they do win-win.
Mhm.
It's part of their whole thing. They have a Belt and Road Initiative that they have implemented in several countries. Through their
Mm.
initiative, Ethiopia now has a rail line through Djibouti all the way to the ports of Djibouti.
Mhm. Interesting.
The Kenyans have a standard railway that goes from Nairobi to Mombasa. The
Mhm.
Mozambicans are having some rail. There's some infrastructural.
It
It's what they have been doing all over Africa.
benefits,
You know,
yes.
in
Yes.
Nigeria, in Abuja, there we see their rail lines coming from Abuja to Kaduna. We see in
Mm.
Lagos now, there is a rail system now, light rail is
Oh,
built by
nice.
them. You know, because by miles, nobody comes
And
close.
these are things our own governments could have handled since for over how many decades, but
Yes,
they chose not to
yes,
because they have had the financing to do that. They've refused to improve infrastructure for the average citizens. And so China presenting this is being lauded and is being praised
yes.
for giving that option to
You
the
know,
average person.
we have resources, we have commodities. China has know-how. As for railway, when it comes to railway, there's no country that comes close to them. Their high-speed
Mm.
rail network is the highest in the world. It is the most technologically advanced. And even recently, just about a month ago, Chinese just displayed or unveiled a maglev plane that uses magnetic levitation and speeds that the speed that a plane will take 660 kilometers per hour. That is what a train is taking. And meanwhile, they have high speed trains. So they have the technology, and they have the best they can do is share it. They're really
Mhm.
bringing value to a lot of African countries.
Mhm.
The problem China has had is that we have had a situation where the BBC and the Europeans had used Canal Plus, and they have used BBC, and they have used all these their state instruments of lying and propaganda to make it look like the Chinese were not good to the African people, but it is not the case. It is not the case. So Mali has seen they can smell the coffee. They have gone and
Mm.
said, come and give us a rail line. And then they have gone to meet the Russians. And in fact, the Malian and the Burkinabe presidents were just in Moscow recently. And they go and meet Putin.
Mhm.
They tell Putin, please help us ensure our security because the imperial French are going to come and try to overthrow us again. But so those are the changes that is happening in Africa. The
Correct.
colonialists have been thrown out, and then new players are coming in, and
They're
that's
coming
China and
in.
Russia. Mm.
Mm. Mm. Speaking of So this has to do with geopolitical competition. With AGOA expired and US tariffs rising, how are African states like countries like Nigeria and Rwanda exploiting US-China rivalry to renegotiate terms?
It's it's um it's so sad that at a time that Africa is getting closer to the East, Africa is very far away from China, very far. We are closer to America than China. But the Chinese have come. If you live in Africa, you will know the role that smartphones like Techno play. They give you options, generators. We have small Chinese generators that in Nigeria we call them I pass my neighbor. Very critical. They run a lot of enterprises. They run barbing shops. They run a lot of things. Then at this time when Donald Trump comes and there's big power competition in Africa, what does he do? He starts to levy out tariffs on some countries then. The people who framed AGAWA, the AGOA, in the past to reward Africans so that Africans can come and invest and export to American countries tariff free. They knew what they were doing, but the only thing was that they put all those conditionalities that America tends to like to put. Like they will say you have to allow LGBT. They will tell you that you have to allow your opponent to, they gave so many conditionalities for you to have access to the American market. But now everybody, whether you're a friend or foe, Japan will get their own, Korea will get their own. So who are you in Africa? Africa too, we now have our own. For South Africa, I think it's 30%. Nigeria is 14%. So many countries.
Mhm,
But here's the thing, this is it. While
mhm,
Trump is giving out tariffs against African countries, the Chinese called 53 African countries to Beijing, one city close to
mhm.
Beijing, and announced that from now on there will be no tariff again for any African country. China has opened their economy to Africa tariff free. So you can export coffee, you can export anything you want that you produce that the Chinese may want, and you can go into the Chinese economy tariff free. So here is one blocking access to the American market, and
And
yes,
another one opening up. Yeah,
and this is the
yeah.
catch. You don't, when you're going, you have the option of earning dollar if you want, that's what you want from the Chinese. They will pay you
Hmm.
in dollar. But because the Chinese are your biggest trading partner, China is the biggest trading partner of almost every country in Africa. You can also
Hmm.
trade with your local currencies. So they call it currency swap. And they have currency swap between Nigeria and between Congo, between all with China. So you use Naira and change for dollar, for renminbi.
Oh,
You don't have to use dollar. So they have
hmm.
currency swap in Nigeria. They have about currency swap with several countries in Africa. So you trade
Wow.
your local
So
currency.
it's safe to say those deals are going to be struck with China over the
Yeah.
United
They are
States.
already struck. The Chinese have planted Iroko. If you know that tree called Iroko in Nigeria, they have planted,
And it takes many years
they have been
to
doing it for the past 30 years. They come, they give you generator, very important to your life. They give you solar panel. If you go to Nigeria now, every compound and every house has solar panel from China. They
and
give
the
you,
reason is because Africa is such a fertile region.
mhm,
Yes, but the corruption of the leaders is what stifles the growth and development,
yes,
right? And then also the eyes of the West on Africa. So there have been a lot of pitfalls, right? Or established, or should I say that have caused the very slow growth of Africa. And so I think that by dominating those infrastructural and developmental areas, right? By dominating and also being effective through that route, they've won the hearts of Africa. Even the corrupt leaders are probably grateful to have Chinese backing because they don't want to do the work. If they wanted to do the work all these years, they would have made the effort. Like for instance, when you talk about the train system,
mhm,
come on, the train system that we have or we had were train systems that were established since the 70s. And when you have things like that, you must maintain them, right?
Mm.
So they didn't improve on it, they didn't maintain it, and a lot of those things broke down. So my point is, there's been that, or it's been already established in the past. All we needed to do was either improve upon it, or even at the very least maintain the one we had. They did no such thing. So for China to swoop in now and start to help them recreate, it's like relief. You understand? For all
Mhm.
these greedy leaders, it's relief for them. They're happy. They're like, okay, come and help us. Not that they didn't have the foresight to get it done. It's just that, as with everything in, in developing countries, if there's no if the checks and balances are weak, then they get away with any nonsense that they choose to do. And that has been what we've seen, right? So China is very appreciated. Even me living in America, I'm happy that China is in Africa. You know, I'm
Mm.
happy it's coming to regions in Africa, or it's
Yes,
helping out regions in Africa. Yes.
China, China is by no means a saint in Africa. They are not. They are there and they are human beings too. Some people exploit
Hmm.
the countries. They make, like
Hmm.
when they are very good in business, so when they sign a contract with you,
Hmm.
but what they have done for Africa is that they've given alternative. Because before, you know the way the French and the British, they carved up Africa in the Berlin Conference, and they carved up Africa
Yeah.
into territories. So no, you are not going to go anywhere. It's just them that you will still need. And besides that, they were the technological advanced countries of that time. So if you're not
Hmm.
buying a Mercedes, you're buying a Peugeot. If you're not buying a Peugeot, you're buying a British car, a Leyland or Sunrise or something. So you don't have any alternative then. But now, even in cars, the best cars, if you go to this thing, the most modern new cars that you can drive
Hmm.
are now Chinese cars. But people will still tell you that, oh, Mercedes-Benz is good, and Mercedes-Benz is not even able to sell its cars again in China. They sell now, they are competing with BYD, they are competing, real competition, man.
One of the biggest arguments to make is the fact that in America, most of the things we use are Chinese made.
All your ring and all your telephones and all the things they do, the little things,
Are
the ones they don't
Chinese.
want you to have is the ones that can get into like telephone networks. But anything again, if you go to all those factories, in fact, all the factories that I have worked in America, they all used to import Chinese products to make and use and make and made in America product. They all need intermediate products made from China to add to complete the whole thing and say slap the made in America on it. So you can't find
Crazy.
you can't find a product that is from beginning to end completely American. It's almost very hard now. Steel with the steel, the plastic, one element of it and a significant amount may be from China. And that's why that's why you
That
see
was why
this.
Donald Trump attacked the way he did, right?
He did, he did, but he ran into a roadblock. See what happened. Donald Trump comes and then he's sharing tariffs and then he escalates and he says China, if China does not agree to him, he now took it up to 145% tariff against the
Hmm.
Chinese. The Chinese didn't say much. What they just did is that from today, they're not going to sell a very simple product or magnet to America. They said they won't sell a magnet. That magnet is usually made up of rare earth metals. But that magnet is needed for jet fighters. It is needed for artillery. It is needed for Patriot missile. It is needed for everything that America needs. It is needed in
Hmm.
cars. It is needed in everything. And what did
Hmm.
Ford started closing factories in just 2 weeks? Because it's only China that produces 90% of all those magnets on planet Earth. And in that
Wow.
reason, for that reason, Trump has went and had to go and make a deal with the Chinese. The Chinese didn't want to talk to him. They started going, so he sent his minister, his treasury secretary to London to meet Switzerland, Geneva to meet them. They agreed on the first instance. He didn't like the agreement, so he started telling Chinese students and trying to make some more problem for China. Then the Chinese just banned completely sale of those magnets to America. He now
Yes.
sent his Secretary of Treasury and Secretary of of commerce to go and meet the Chinese again, this time in London, and then they made a deal. And he has never talked to China again and disturbed them again. Rather, he's trying to make peace
That's crazy.
because
That is
they can't
crazy.
have their F-15, their F-16, their planes, their ships, their submarines without supply chain. In fact, the one that was very embarrassing that even their Tomahawk missiles, the flight control and everything, the semiconductor that is in it is from China.
What China did, China took time,
Hmm.
went to the drawing board, empowered, how do I say, developed their manpower, right?
Hmm.
When the world was focused on, remember the whole birth rate thing that China
Hmm.
was going on in China, the world was more judgmental about, okay, these are the things they've imposed on their people. But what they were doing in that moment was empowering themselves. And then the world was also focused on the fact that they were a communist nation. So we were focused on the things that didn't even matter while they were busy building from scratch and learning ways to sort of dominate the world. And this is what we're seeing 30 years later. They've become a superpower and they're now challenging a whole America. Is interesting. Their strategy should be studied. Their strategy should be maybe if like the likes of Ibrahim Traore can study that strategy, to empower because it's not something that is immediate. It takes time.
Hmm.
It requires a few decades. But if you put your head down, it will work. Like, okay, even let's even compare Nigeria and Ghana. Do you remember when in the 80s, Ghana was being criticized for moving down to Nigeria with the
Hmm.
Ghana must go back joke and
Hmm.
all that? But a few of my teachers in school then were Ghanaian
Yeah,
teachers, right?
they were science teachers mainly then.
Yes. And then next thing, they went back and empowered their own nation
Yeah, they're
and all
doing
that. And
very
now
well now.
Nigeria, they have the better universities at this time in Ghana, So it's very interesting. So I think that this speaks to what a nation can become if they were to put their head down and just empower their people, develop from within first. Over time, things will just play out to be better. I don't
Yeah.
know. What are your last thoughts?
Well, we are very grateful that the world has become multipolar because for those people who really used to control the world, it's their way or the highway. The Chinese have created a big cleavage in amongst them, and their technology has created pathways, and their
Mhm.
financial contributions and their policies have made people in Africa to have alternative. And alternative is really, if they were trying to give alternative before, they would have been destroyed were they
Yeah,
not powerful. But the very fact that they are powerful and they can stand up to any country that tries to threaten them now, because they are so they can stand up to anybody, and for that reason,
they can.
if you go and you are taking from them, before they can go and destroy them, but now you they can't destroy them. The Igbo trader who goes to Guangdong has been going to Guangdong for the past 20, 30 years. And the Kenyans who go to that same Guangdong, the people from Ghana, the people from South Africa, when they have their Canton Festival, they have a large contingent of Africans because they are the ones who supply Africans with so many things that make Africa successful and Africa is growing. And it is that alternative. We know how hard it is to get to America, and it is getting even harder. Now they are doing everything to block access to countries like America for both students, for every
Mhm.
single thing is hard, you know.
Mhm.
So when you have alternative that you can get, countries like Dubai, if you want to go on holiday before, you only go to London, but now you can go to Dubai, you can go to Abu Dhabi, you can go to. So alternatives are really good. It's what enriches the world, you know.
Mhm.
It's even good
Mhm.
for you to experience different cultures. So that's the way I see it.
That's good. That's
Mm.
good. But great conversation today. Really
Yes,
great
yes.
conversation. If we could touch a little bit, we have 2 minutes on what's going on in America. I heard that your best friend, Donald Trump, is requesting for Obama to be arrested for treason. That was
Is
the biggest joke I had heard in a while. amongst all the other Epstein things going on.
It's a
I thought that was
distraction.
very funny. I thought that was funny, and that was his tactic at, like, you know, diverting the conversation or the attention from himself. What do you think?
Well, it's diversionary, but let's not forget that the Democrats really did. They were in denial at the fact that in the first instance, Trump actually won. And the British had a hand in all these things because the British don't particularly like the Russians. So all the things that was used against Donald Trump was a cooked up lie by a British spy. And he sent that lie, it's called a Steele report. He sent that lie to the CIA and to all these organizations that now ran with it, gave it to the press. The British have continued to be that way with the Russians. And it's a surprise that they have not even called the British agent and jailed him in America for interference with government. But he will say that he only gave a report. And this is what they do. They continue to do this thing. So we should know that there was a whole conspiracy, and it has been proven over many times that there was a conspiracy. The involvement of Obama in it now is the one that is a little bit funny because of the timing.
It's funny because it
But it
has
was
no.
not a nice thing. It impacted heavily on Russia. There's big Russophobia in the West, and people who don't like Russia are still plenty in America till today. But it was a lie, and it has been proven to be a lie. But till this day, six embassy buildings of Russia has been seized because of that report that was a lie, and nobody has returned it to them. Anyway, it seems like our time is almost running up. Weruche was nice talking today.
Nice
Should be
talking with
doing
you
this
too.
geopolitics, Africa and geopolitics much more often.
No problem.
Okay.